Welcome to the ROI Masterclass, the podcast where vision meets strategy and bold moves create measurable results. I'm Liat Siegel, interior designer and ROI strategist with 17 years of experience. I help businesses transform properties and ideas into high-performing assets. This show is specifically for real estate investors, hospitality operators, and boutique developers who aren't afraid to take risks, challenge the status quo, and demand a return on every decision they make. Each and every week, we talk with innovators and leaders across industries about the strategies and the insights and really all the unconventional thinking that turns potential into profit every single time. If you believe that smart design, decisive leadership, and strategic risk are the keys to real ROI, you're in the exact right place. Let's dive in.
That was up, and one said dream, the other one said believe. It was kind of what I always preached in the classroom. Well, my kids listen, and I taught math, which no kid loves as a freshman, right? And so I would do things to try to bring fun into the classroom, bring joy to them if you can with algebra. But I said, listen, you can do anything you want. Right. You just got to be able to believe. Not everybody's going to get to do it easily. We moved to Euless, Texas in '67. And my dad immediately started a horse trainer and horse breeder. And so early on, they started having me be responsible for our animals. Our job was to go out, feed the horses and all that stuff. And when I was at the end of my 5th grade, they just said, we're going to turn the stables over to you. You're going to run it. You're going to manage it. You're going to deal with the customers. You're going to collect the money. You're going to do all that.
Wow. How old were you?
I was in 5th grade.
Wow.
End of 5th grade going into my 6th grade year. It's not complicated. And really, it's not like we had a ton. I think we probably had about 5 or 6. That's kind of how I kind of got started into that. And so go to school, get my degree, be straight. Again, not the best student in the world. Flounder around a little bit. This would have been early 80s. Fast forward to wanting to go back to school full time, but not want to move home. That's where the military came in. I got to find a way to where I can work part time, go to school full time, and not move home. So that's when I enlisted in the Air Force Reserves. That gave me the money for school and helped provide a little monthly income. And then I went back to school, finished my degree up, eventually get married. Can't do things easy. Let's start off with an instant family. And then I went into education. And once I went there, I just started progressing. We started the real estate side of this. I think it was 2018. We just opened a second stables. Took over my father's stables in 2006. He passed. We started a second stables in Pilot Point, Texas. And I was driving on a Sunday to Pilot Point to meet a tenant or a renter, a boarder is what we kind of refer to them, pick up a boarder's check. He needed to pay for the monthly rent, right? So I'm listening to the radio and this guy comes on and starts talking about the 5 income streams of real estate. You don't have to know real estate. You just got to understand the math. I'm like, hey, I'm a math teacher. I can do this. I'm driving and I didn't write it down. So I got home, I told my wife about this thing, but I couldn't remember what it was about. I just remember 5 income streams. I couldn't even remember all 5 of them. So I called my brother. I said, hey, have you ever heard of a book or anything? No. Okay. Fast forward to about 2 weeks later, again, driving to Pilot Point to collect rent, and it came back on again. And this time I was smart enough. I pulled off the side of the road. I wrote it down, and it's an organization very prominent in Dallas-Fort Worth that kind of teaches an investment model for passive investment. They teach a passive investment model for single family, and then they teach a passive investment model for multi. We start off, I do my research. First year, all we do is just go through and we're going to classes and we're doing the online classes that they had available. And there was a lot of material there, but we didn't have really a cash position to begin. Basically, I started talking to a couple of hard money guys, and I had one who's become a very good friend of mine now. What I did was I sold the Pilot Point stable. It was barely breaking even as it was. It needed another year to 2 years before it really was going to launch big. Sold every one of my horses, took a horse trailer, I swapped it for a car, and then sold the car. I think we gathered about $18K is what we had in the bank. And so I'm talking to this hard money guy, Doug Phillips, and we had a lot of equity in her. And he says, oh, you need a HELOC. What the heck's a HELOC? He explains. I'm like, okay. So I happened to be involved with the Wise County Chamber of Commerce by then. And one of the board members was a local banker to me, who has become a very good friend of mine. And you'll see a reoccurring theme in my life. I love relationships. I love building them, and I'm very loyal to you get on my bad side, you're probably never coming off the bad side, because I go to great lengths to try to nurture and foster those
relationships are everything.
Absolutely. And I think that's another reason why I love the business so much, because that's really what you get to do. It's you're building a relationship. It's not really selling a house or convincing somebody this is the house to buy. It's like, hey, let's do this together. You and I, let me help you find your dream home. Let me help you fulfill those ideas that you want you have in your head to make you happy.
And I speak to so many investors, and I think that's the common theme is desire for collaboration and not believing that you're the smartest person in the room, right? Wanting to bring on other people with various different talents and visions, and to be able to work together in unison to create something that's really massively impactful, but also extremely financially profitable.
Yes. No, I mean, that's it. Exactly. So it's just something that, I don't know, it's there's a trust there. There's a respect there. But on the other side, especially as a real estate agent, but even on the investor side, when we're flipping houses, kind of getting a feel for that new buyer of our house and the excitement they're feeling when they first walk into them. Again, I got that same feeling when I was teaching in the classroom. When I was in sales before, I never really experienced that kind of joy. When I closed a big deal, that would be a commission check. Cool, right? But you don't really, because those sales, especially business to business back then, it's really kind of wham, bam, and you get out. Close and you write the contract and you move on. So you don't really get to build rapport or relationship. Now you do, or at least on this side, I do. So that's kind of how we got started. And then we'd get the HELOC. We have about 35K in the business. At the time, the recommendation was at 50. Again, I'm talking to Doug and I'm kind of lamenting, we're just not there. And we weren't great savers at that moment in time. And so he's like, well, why don't you flip? What do you mean flip? Go flip a house instead of just follow your model, which is one thing about that organization. They teach a great model, right? The mathematics of it. And he said, just flip, cash position up. Because we wanted rental. At the beginning of it all, it was all about passive income. So I go to Deidre, my wife, and I say, let's do this. He looks at me like, that is not what we talked about, sir. And I explained, we're still going to follow the model. We're going to follow everything to the T, except that instead of holding it, instead of refinancing it and holding it, and we'll buy it at the right position. Because that's the key on whether you're buying or hold or whether you're flipping, it's all on the buy. That's where you make your money. So we went out and I called my brother. I said, I wasn't an agent at the time. I said, okay, come January 1st, I want to start with this. Like, okay. I started reaching out to wholesalers. January 6th, Dieter and I walked our first property and I made an offer. And I found what the piece of I really love real estate, besides the relationship side. I love the negotiation side. So I'm haggling with a wholesaler, which wholesalers don't really haggle. But I was still haggling. And so we got that first house, not a clue what to do. In fact, if you go to our YouTube channel, you'll see an interview I did that my wife knew way more about construction than I ever dreamed about. Dad helped me build barns, but I was a total fetch kid. That's really it. Dad would do all the work and the construction and the concepts. Little I did pick up was more from osmosis, right? But we flipped it and took too long. That's where I really started learning contractors or everything. But we still made money. I think we went about $15K over budget, but I still made $15,000 and it was $20,000 above. We sold it for $20,000 above what I projected. That's back when I could buy a house at $30,000 here in North Texas.
That's crazy. That's just mind blowing.
I know. You can't, that same house would cost you at least $100K right now. Another incidental event, because we started buying the cheapest of the cheap, which meant we bought the worst of the worst early on. God, I'm trying to think. No, every single house we've done has been a gut. Again, we didn't walk into it saying, hey, let's get the works and cut everything and start from scratch. But at the time, that's all we really could afford. So we just started doing that. Kind of became our thing. We kind of specialized in the worst of the worst. Listen, you can't really scare me walking into a house now. I'm pretty straightforward. I'll tell them, listen, I think I'm running about a 60-40. If I was in baseball, I'd be a 600% hitter, right? But in real estate investment, 60 is not bad. I really want to be closer to 80% where on my flips that I'm making money on my flip. I've been lucky where when we do take a loss, it's minuscule. And it's hit right to where on the tax side, it kind of really helps offset some of our tax. At least I'm being successful on more than what I'm losing on.
It sounds like you've been through a lot. Like you've gone through so many different chapters in your life. and evolutions, I would say. What do you feel like is like the most defining moment, and like how did that change how you do things today?
Interesting question. It's hard to say a defining moment because obviously there's certain things in my life that were super impactful. The day my daughter was born, the day I deployed to Iraq, the day I came home from Iraq. My brother marveled at when I pulled the trigger on our very first deal. He's like, you weren't kidding. You wanted to get this done. I'm like, I told you, I want to buy. January 1st and on, I wanted to buy. And that's where a lot of investors have problems. They won't pull the trigger. Paralysis by analysis, right? I just had a gut feeling, and I have learned to trust my gut. I will be more right than I'm ever going to be wrong just by my gut feeling. And I always articulate why I think this is right. I can certainly crank out numbers and stuff like that. The numbers don't always indicate exactly whether it's going to be successful or not. And so I think for me, doing that first deal and having it be successful to some extent, especially knowing what I didn't, now I know what I didn't know. That was probably one of the big, for a real estate investor, that was probably one of my biggest defining moments. We did take what is, at least in my mind, conceptually one of the hardest things to do, which is strip it down all the way to the bare bones and start completely from scratch. That first house had everything. And the other thing I like to do, I like to get in and I like to meet the neighbors.
That's smart. That's very smart.
If I can build a little rapport, and it's benefited us before, can't tell you how many times on a job site, I'll get a phone call, hey, James, somebody's trying to steal your stuff. When you have materials dropped off, right? So that's happened on 2 or 3 different job sites. That's because we go talk to our neighbors and we let them know, hey, we want to be good neighbors. And if you can something, let us know. We're going to try to make this worst house of the neighborhood be the best house.
Right. It's all about the human connection, like we were talking about before, and building those relationships, whether it's, with business partners or tradespeople or the buyers or neighbors. It's really about people and connection. And I preach this a lot in terms of, the design, that it's not just ROI in terms of, making people more money because everybody knows that something that looks beautiful, you can charge more for. But it's also about the people using the space and how good do they feel. And, if you're taking into consideration how your construction or, your activities affect neighbors, that's also a people metric. And that absolutely affects the bottom line too.
100% agree. And even our last conversation has impacted me already because it's gotten me rethinking our finishes in our houses. Well, but that was your intent, is it not? I mean, that's kind of what you try to do. Your purpose is to look at things in a little different light. It's, hey, we all see fixtures, right? But think about how it could possibly impact if it's, instead of buying the cheapest one, what about this? If it improves the aesthetics, then it should improve the desire to buy. As we talked before, we focus mostly on entry-level homes. So we are doing a lot of builder grade stuff. The discussion we had, you're still on point. Maybe we don't spend a lot more money on the fixture itself, but we do look at the design side of it to improve the aesthetics, which improves the marketability, which will improve the ability to sell the house. And in today's market, at least in North Texas, it is absolutely a buyer's market right now. Things are still moving. The price points haven't really dropped, which is kind of weird because usually when real estate slows, you start seeing price drops. But that's not what's happening. Things are still selling at market value. They're just taking 120 to 160 days to turn. So any edge you can get, improve that excitement level. When they walk in, you want them to go.
Before that, even, I would say that conversion happens when they first see the pictures online. And how do they see those pictures online? By the design of your space. Even if you stage it virtually or you make changes digitally and they go and they see something different in person, you're going to lose their confidence and trust. So having beautiful pictures of the space, and to your point, not just about buying higher end things, but ensure that those things are properly coordinated together.
Yes.
Right.
Yes.
You don't understand why they like something or why something is beautiful. When we understand that psychology of the buyer and we're able to quantify it through doing a comp analysis and saying, oh, this property and this size home or whatever sold for this amount, what were those things in terms of the aesthetics that got it to that price point or got it to sell faster than the typical houses that you have holding costs? It's just sitting and sitting and sitting for days on end.
You hit on point. I just had the conversation with this buyer. And so she was asking me, okay, James, explain to me how you come up with your market value. And I said, well, I start with just the basic comps. My brother taught me all of this, right? I do plus or minus 200 on the square footage. Try to stay at or newer than whatever the current year is. Now, sometimes I don't factor in year on our flips because by the time I'm done, it's a new house. I don't factor date in on that one. But in this particular case, he wanted something that was a 1990 or newer. So I'll look at that. And then that's really it. I don't add anything else. Then I go find, and I'm trying to find at least 3. And then once I find those 3, that gives me just an average per square foot to kind of get an idea of what something might be worth. It's looking at the same things, but analyzing it differently. For me, on the investor side, I'm going, okay, this is the top end. This is how I want to finish out the house. On the buy side for our client, again, I'm looking to see what the finish out is. So I'm making sure that I'm comparing apples to apples. In this particular case, in that 1990, some of these houses, even though they're fairly decently priced, they're still at the time when they were built were more entry-level homes. So I've been shocked at how many houses I've come across. And it's funny because you can almost tell the houses that the investor is doing or they've listened to the agent. That's what I do on my side, both on the investor side. I'm looking at all the same things, but the outcome, the output is really different because it's done for different purposes. Mm-hmm. And I'm going to find the best one to use my model to finish it out. Hers, I'm making sure it's just matching and that's really apples to apple.
Exactly. I mean, it's so important to understand your market and the comps. You know, like you said, there's this undertone of also this gut check and knowing your hyper local market to know what kind of upgrades, what strategic upgrades need to be implemented in order to see the highest return. And in terms of that, what are those specific upgrades, what those specific aspects that you see the highest return? Anything else that you feel is a worthwhile investment?
For me, the other thing, and it's a big push on our side, it took a couple of years for her to convince me to do LVP. There's a value in doing the LVP because basically you buy one flooring for everything. So you got it easier. You do have a little bit, your cost per square foot maybe going to go up, but your labor costs is going to negate that because tile is going to take more labor. It's more labor intensive, right? We'll still do tile and showers. Countertops is a big thing. The contractor we use for the second house is the contractor I've used on every single house since then. And he's the guy who did my countertops in my house. So that's kind of the loyalty and the relationships I build. I'm going to stay with my relationship because my relationship, when I'm in a dire need, that relationship is going to help create a sense of urgency with somebody that knows, hey, James is going to give me every piece of his business when he gets it. I'm really starting to reevaluate. And again, this is because of you. Looking at fixtures. Even so, yes, you've had the impact that you already are trying to have. So, but even looking at the fixtures and stuff, just looking at it a little differently, I'm not going to get to do anything less than what I'm doing because my wife will know it. Her opinion is when we finish something, that's our signature. That reflects us. And so we're never going to do anything that we think doesn't reflect positively on us. I'd rather go a little bit over and give a better value for, even on the renter side. Because again, you still need to turn the property, whether it's sell or to rent. And the better it's finished out or the nicer and the cleaner it is, the quicker that's going to happen.
I'm curious, now that you've had time to kind of let it simmer since our last conversation, do you feel like, given the philosophy and given that properly coordinated materials, not expensive materials, but properly coordinated materials, do you think that having a prepackaged design plan for investors to just have everything pre-coordinated would be of value to them? And if not, why? And what kind of, because last time you touched on different types of markets and that you're in the entry-level home market. So what kind of markets do you see design being the most impactful for? Do you still think that it's not for entry-level homes, or have I changed your mind?
I'm not going to say you changed my mind, but you opened my mind.
Okay, I'll take
consideration.
it.
So, I mean, it's the door's open. I'm certainly weighing it in. And I think we told you this. Deidre really is the design side of this, and I'm the negotiation, budget-minded contractor dealing with, right? Listen, I can be a little slow to change. I mean, it's funny because I'll pull the trigger on a deal in a heartbeat. So, but yet it took her a couple of years before she convinced me, okay, let's try LVP. I think it can. The prepackaged thing is an interesting thought process, or an idea, I should say, because anything you can do to streamline and make it faster is a benefit, which is why we use the same palette paint colors consistently. I think there's some value there. in a prepackaged idea.
So it's knowing, it's not about, just putting any white. It's about knowing which white has the right undertones and what to pair it with in terms of trim. And then having that as your go-to repeatable system so that your trades can automatically know this is what we're doing. There's no question about it. And I know, and I have that peace of mind and confidence that this has a design eye. And I can even say that in my marketing tools. This is designer created, even though it's entry level. It's that other marketing tool in order to set yourself apart, really in any market, whether it's a buyer's or a seller's market, to really have that additional edge. You can also, if you know that you're doing whatever number of houses, then you have the volume game where you can build relationships with manufacturers and say, well, I'm going to be buying X number, and then be able to buy from them and say, well, I'm going to give you this amount of business. And because you have that consistency with them, they will give you, the volume discount.
And that's a great point, because then you're buying more direct versus through a Home Depot. Nothing wrong with Home Depot, because we'll use Home Depot and we use Lowe's. Lowe's really more out here where I'm living, because that's really all I have. But obviously they're a retailer. They're going to mark things up. And although they do have builder bulk pricing, it's not the same as if I'm buying directly from Ferguson. And if you've got the volume, that in actually what we've been saying consistently, it allows you to build those relationships, because the numbers is all, we'll say it's all about math. Every time you can cut $1 here and cut $1 there, that just improves that ROI as a whole.
It's really about doing two things: increasing the revenue and also decreasing costs. But not everything is, especially when it comes to design, which is why I think a lot of investors kind of resist, is that design seems like it's just excess when it's really a strategy play. It's not always the emotional. People buy homes because of emotion, at least not like, obviously the investors buy because of the numbers pencil, but the buyers don't buy just because of that. They'll be willing to spend a little bit more because emotionally they feel connected to this property. They feel like it wasn't just construction grade or builder grade. They feel like there was a little bit more care, a little bit more effort, even if it's staged. We have to understand also in terms of ROI that even if it's not just the dollars, obviously we want them to make sense, but to spend a little bit more to make that emotional connection with the buyer so that the property moves that much faster.
I think it's a very astute observation on your side, because I don't know, and I certainly didn't when I first started. I thought a doorknob's a doorknob, light fixture's a light fixture, right? Didn't matter. And so for me, it was all, okay, I want the least expensive one that I can buy. And so it was, and I'd love to give you credit, but unfortunately my wife worked on me first, right? She kind of really was first proponent about, he's like, James, listen, we're struggling here on some of our profit side because taking long to get something done, fix stuff or whatever. And she's like, we need to spend a little more on the contract. I mean, we can take your concept and expand it even into the contractor world. Yeah. To the contractor himself.
Do you feel, and how important do you feel having strategic partners at the table is? Like having the right people who are in it with you and care about the numbers?
All investors say that it's a big critical piece. All the big gurus that are doing the training, they'll all say that it's all about your team. It's all about that. I don't know that every investor believes that. This investor does, because we really consistently started making money, and it wasn't coin flip at the end of the day. Is when I started using the same contract, and I could start projecting budgets, because your model's going to tell you based on comps where you need to be at. If you don't have we have budget correct, a little bit off there will screw up that bottom line. So using the same contractors and consistently having the same type of work, especially since we're cutting everything, I was able to basically say, okay, per square foot, this is what my cost is by doing everything. That's when we started consistently making money, is when I had the same contractors and I could really hit my budgets well. Now, I'm not going to say we're great at timelines yet. I'm not sure what I'm doing or what I'm not doing as a leader to get us on timelines, but we're still staying in our budgets. And that's the other thing, these guys work on a budget. And if it doesn't, the only added cost I'm going to have if it takes too long is my holding cost. And they both understand that that's not. But I also, when I factor in my budgets, I take pardon my language again, we didn't expect that. I factor that into my purchase price. But I think without a doubt, That's important. Having the right team around you is critical for success on the investment.
Absolutely. So what would you say is the number one, like summarizing all of this up, what's the number one driver of ROI for a real estate investment?
I really think you got to buy it. If you don't buy it right, it doesn't really matter. You can have the best contractor, you can have the worst contractor, and you do it for the cheapest, whatever. If you don't buy it right, you're not going to make money, which means you really need to understand your numbers and you need to understand your math and the profit that you want to make. One thing I have is because I do have education retirement and I have my military retirement, and technically I can draw Social Security next year. I've got my personal budget kind of locked down. I don't have to live on my investments. So for me, just making 10 to 15% return and to continue to build assets, that's important to me. Now, the other thing I do on my holds, though, and I just had this conversation with my daughter's boyfriend. He's a young guy. He can be an equity capture guy and not always concern himself with cash flow. So if it's a push or a net zero, he's okay with that because he's getting equity capture. I'm not that guy. I'm holding something. I need to cash flow because January I'll be 62. I don't anticipate another 30 years of life, right? So if I'm going to build this portfolio to the scale that we would like it, because my next big goal is to actually have a portfolio that's large enough with passable income that we can now retire Deidre. She's a nurse and she loves her job, but we've recently been having a lot of discussions about her wanting to go get a real estate license. Not that she would be an active agent in the sense of buyers and sellers, but she would when need, if she wanted to, but really to help more on the broker side and help manage things that are happening on that side.
I'm curious also if you wouldn't mind sharing with us something that you shared before the show about your brother and the biggest lesson that he taught you, because I think that would be super valuable for our audience, because there's asides for the money component of things, there's the human component. We're not just chasing the next big deal, though those are fun, but it's also about a bigger picture and about enjoying life, enjoying the ride and the relationships like we had discussed.
I realize you risked me crying again. I'm telling you, Rick has been instrumental. First place, helping me. When I came to him after we did our very first flip, I said, let's have our own real estate agent. He was kind of fixing to be in a transactional situation with his brokerage. I was retiring and Rick thought he was going to get the brokerage, but it didn't play out there. So he was like, okay, sure, I'll be the broker. As long as I don't have to go build stuff, I'm like, okay. When I did that first one, my brain just went, I mean, we made profit. I mean, honestly, I kept saying, hey, listen, I just got to do this 4 times a year with what we made on that first one. And I've already duplicated my income that I was making at the time as a middle school principal. So my brain was already, I'm going to networking groups and I'm networking and I'm watching videos and I'm listening to podcasts and I listen to some very specific people and guys that I think are really good at it. Of course, they're talking about this, they're talking about mobile home parks, they're talking about storage facilities and, group homes. And my brain's just, and I'm calling Rick every other day. And I'm and Rick was always, slow down. Let's do one well first. Of course, when I come back, my ADD would kick in and I'd be like, I don't have time. We got to go. Right. But like I mentioned before, that's why his passing it's sad, but it's not, it's more tied to having gotten to relive some of those experiences. It's really solidified the impact he's had on my life. But even that last day that I got to see him when he was still coherent, again, same scenario. He's walking me. He needed me to help finish buyer, or really a seller at the time, finish up this deal for him in the hospital at the time. Oh, he's saying it. And of course some of the tumors were on his lungs. So breathing was a bit of a challenge. He would take a breath and it would take him, he would slower to talk. Very clear when he talked, but still slower to talk. So and then he'd say something, kind of that rhythm. And then he'd make his name, and blah, 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 blah. He's like, slow down, take a breath. I even mentioned it when I spoke at his funeral. It was such a great lesson because I've always been the kid who was go, 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 go. I liked going 100 miles an hour. I don't multitask as well as I used to, but I used to love multitasking. And I guess technically I still do right now between property management, building a real estate agency, training agents, all the stuff I do with our Wise County Chamber of Commerce. And then, of course, we got grandkids and my daughter, and she's starting her own business.
That story and that legacy that he left for you, and now you're leaving for your kids, despite you not slowing down, right? But it still anchors you. And I think that we all need to be anchored in that. That's what makes that sentiment so beautiful, that despite all of this being about ROI, this podcast being about ROI, there's something greater than just the money. There's the human aspect and
Yes.
the life quality aspect that we're all after.
Without a doubt, because honestly, relationships is what brings me joy. Don't get me wrong. I love having money and I love being able to buy what I want to buy when I want to buy it, especially when you factor in coming from such humble beginnings. I mean, I come from pretty humble beginnings. Dad was a truck driver. Mom was not sure what the PC would be now, but she was clerical. Smart woman. My smart comes from her, not a dig on my dad. I mean, we lived in literally, I think it was about a 700 square foot, 2-bedroom, 1-bath house. That's what I grew up in. Our floors, our subfloors was our floors. So, I mean, I come from very humble beginnings, which is to say, kind of reiterates the thing to me that I try to reiterate to kids when I was teaching. Everybody can achieve. It's just a question of how hard you're willing to work for. You know, I use the old euphemism, everybody has a different row to hoe. No farming thing. Basically saying, listen, some guys only have to row or hoe weed, if you will, a short one. Some have to do longer. It's just a matter of effort, and you've got to kind of put your nose to the grindstone and continue to work until you achieve what you want. Not everybody's going to make an A, but it doesn't mean that you can't make an A. You just got to decide how much work are you doing. The way to get better at math is to do more, not to do less. So hopefully it taught the lesson that it's about not about the effort, but I don't want to use effort because honestly, you can put all the effort in. Well, that doesn't mean you're. But if you don't put the effort, you guarantee you're not. And you don't have to be the smartest guy to be a real estate agent. You just got to be willing to be the student of the game. As long as you study, and that's what I did that first year, I absorbed much content as I possibly could and go network. And so to me, that's the big piece of it. I work hard and be willing to do whatever it takes. Right. And that's where some people are always going to fall short. Early on, and I jokingly said this, Rick didn't like me putting this in. I said, I became an agent because I got tired of waiting on him for my comps. Because Rick had already developed that point in his life where it's like, listen, I'm going to do what I'm going to do during business hours. But in the evening, it's my time going to do my stuff. And I get that. And so I kept saying, but Rick, only time I have to do analysis properties and to look in the evening. That's why I got to have the comps. I understand. And so he started stepping up.
I love it. Wow. This has been so jam-packed with so many nuggets. And I really appreciate you sharing so much of your personal journey, your story.
I know that probably wasn't really where you were wanting us to go when we first started having the conversation, but I appreciate being able to get to share it.
No, it's perfect. It was perfect.
Awesome. That's what I love to hear. So
yeah. And I loved having you on, and I can't wait to see what's next for you, what's in store, because it sounds like, you're constantly, I love to speak to people who are growth minded and they're constantly learning and trying to do better at any point of their life. And no matter how many struggles they've gone through, they're just constantly like, life is this classroom and I just need to learn. So I really appreciate that sentiment a lot.
Absolutely. I mean, it's funny, when I finished my degree, I would have told you, if you just said, James, you're going to be a law firm. I'm like, no. And then next thing you know, I'm going, well, let me go get my master's so I can go to school administration. And it was like, well, maybe I want to go get my doctorate to go be a superintendent. And I did. I did 18 hours towards my doctorate. And then, of course, I got my superintendent certification. And then I was like, where at the school levels I'm going to be at, I don't need a doctorate. But then I would say, well, once I retire, I think I may want to go into school finance. And so let me go get my MBA in accounting. I was really good at accounting when I was younger. So it's funny because as I've gotten older, I'm more about learning. And I was a terrible reader. When I graduated high school, I had a 9th grade, 10th month reading level. I'm sad for an 18-year-old kid who just graduated high school. I'm basically reading at a freshman level. I didn't quite get it at the time. Like, what the heck? So reading's never been my strong suit. But again, it's a means to an end. If I want to learn, this book has got some information that I need it one way or another. I got to go read. I'm not going to lie. ChatGPT kind of helps me some now.
It helps all of us.
I mean, I can now say, okay, the book, let's say the book Traction, right? I'm like, okay, give me a synopsis of the book. And it'll give me the old Cliff Notes, my generation, the Cliff Notes from the 80s, gives me that version. So at least gives me the highlights of what I need to know. And then I can engage and ask questions, which for me, asking questions, I gather more information that way than necessarily just reading per se. But no, I just never thought I would have been that guy, but I've kind of become like that. I like growing. I don't want to be the same. I don't know if this is the best analogy, but I kind of see we really need to be more shark-like than just a fish. You need to be constantly moving. And there's so many examples of that. As we get older, we don't move. We don't go do things. We don't interact. We don't connect. And then you disconnect. And then it's almost like we're just marking time. I don't like that idea. I want to for myself. I want to move forward. I want to learn. I want to continue to grow. But this has been awesome. If you get a chance to go look at my link, Monday I do Monday motivations, and then Fridays I do Friday reflections. And I talked about having this conversation today. And I was like, I'm not real sure. At first, I was like, I'm not sure why this lady from New York would want to know anything about a small-time real estate investor in Texas. But because I won't lie, I was very skeptical when you said, hey, can we at least have a conversation? Because I was like, okay, she's going to sell pitch, but she's going to sell something to me. So it was very pleasant. We were very pleasantly surprised. And I've enjoyed this. This has been very eventful. And obviously, I've learned some. You've expanded my mind, which I always can bring me new thoughts and ideas.
Amazing.
And get me to take them. Because a lot of people present new ideas, but I'm like, nah. But you've opened my mind up to some stuff. I appreciate it.
Glad. It's the biggest compliment. If our audience wants to be able to reach out to you, to speak with you, how can they do that?
Absolutely. I'm always as we talked about, this is very service oriented, this side of the world, and I love that part of it. I'm happy to always help. My email, we're on most of the social networks, Facebook, LinkedIn, Instagram, and Thread. I'm even started doing Thread. Not sure to what extent, but I'm doing it. But you can also I've got a bunch of videos on YouTube that talks from everything from project updates to the 3 pillars of selling your house. They can reach out to me anytime. I'm happy to help. So I'm sure my email and phone number are way more out on the web than what I ever really wanted or anticipated it being, but happy to help anybody if there's questions.
Amazing. Thank you so much for joining us. It's been a pleasure.
Yeah, my pleasure. Absolutely. Thank you for offering it. Have a great day.